If you guys have ever played Left 4 Dead 2, I'm sure you've noticed the military is a massive part of the story. Throughout nearly every campaign, we see the US military completely overrun, pushed back from city to city, reduced to dropping bombs to destroy infrastructure like bridges and roadways. All of this is done in a desperate attempt to slow the spread of the Green Flu. In a previous video, I talked about whether the US military was actually winning in the Left 4 Dead 2 universe. My answer was yes, but what I didn't really dive into was how they win. So that's today's topic. What is the US military strategy after the events of Left 4 Dead 2? And how do they ultimately contain the virus before it ends our way of life? To get us up to speed, we're given several pieces of evidence throughout the games about the Green Flu spread and the military's actions. One of the biggest pieces of the puzzle is a map you can find in Dead Center in the very first room of the campaign. On the first table, you'll see a map. It has different cities marked with an X, meaning they've either been completely lost or there are no longer meaningful military deployments there to stop the infection. From different clues across the games, we can also deduce that the Green Flu most likely began in the fictional city of Fairfield, Pennsylvania. This is the same city that contains Mercy Hospital and serves as the setting for the No Mercy campaign. But if we look back at the Dead Center map, showing all the regions that have been lost, something interesting jumps out. Many cities north of Pennsylvania are unmarked. Why is that? The most reasonable assumption is that the Green Flu has a weakness to colder climates. We need to remember, the infection doesn't make you impervious to the elements. The infected are still technically alive. Although the games never explicitly confirm this, it would mean the infected can eventually die of hunger, dehydration, or even exposure to the cold. That could explain why they haven't moved into Canada or much of the northern United States. The map does confirm that New York has been lost. So to all the New Yorkers watching, rest in peace to your incredible culinary delicacies. But if you look farther north toward Boston or the state of Maine, you'll notice there's no X, no markings at all. This could mean one of two things. Either the map was drawn after contact was lost, meaning it's outdated, or those areas actually managed to contain the infection. Considering the map is updated all the way down south to New Orleans, I think the latter is more likely. The fact that the map reflects real-time military intel tells me one thing. If the infection is spreading north, it's doing so at a much slower rate than it is spreading west. And as we move through the Left 4 Dead 2 campaigns, it becomes clear that the military has shifted to a scorched earth policy. Take the parish, for example. If the soldiers there are following the same orders as the rest of the US military, it's safe to say the government has abandoned city-by-city containment and survivor evacuations. Instead, their focus is on salvaging entire regions. In the parish, that means destroying the bridge out of New Orleans. The US military has had centuries of experience using America's geography as a defensive tool, and the infected clearly can't swim. The bridge destroyed in the parish is the Veterans Memorial Bridge, which crosses the massive Mississippi River. The Mississippi stretches from Lake Itasca in Minnesota all the way to the Gulf of Mexico near New Orleans. In effect, it's a natural wall cutting the nation in half, a barrier the military can use to buy time. It's also clear the military has realized that standard infantry and rifles can't stop the infected. In Crash Course, we see a howitzer artillery gun set up to fire at a bridge. The truck carrying it was stopped abruptly, so it might not have been its final destination. But the point is obvious. The US military knows heavy firepower and long-range weapons matter far more than small arms. And we actually see another strong hint of this strategy in the parish. The helicopter that extracts the survivors at the end isn't just any helicopter. It's an MH-53E Sea Dragon, a heavy-lift Navy aircraft that's normally launched from aircraft carriers. The fact that this specific chopper shows up in New Orleans implies Papa Gator isn't just some local command post, but part of a carrier strike group operating in the Gulf. That makes perfect sense, because only a carrier would be able to field and sustain that kind of naval helicopter inland during an active outbreak. Though, what combines long-range attacks with overwhelming firepower into one ultimate tool? The United States Air Force. Through coordinated bombardments of cities and population centers, fighter jets can slowly whittle down the infected. And here's the thing. The infected don't need to be killed outright, they just need to be starved out. Eventually, hunger will take care of them. That means risking infantry to save civilians who might already be infected is seen as a foolish gamble. Instead, the military uses air power to strike safely from range, with pilots and personnel far outside infection risk. It's clear to me that the military strategy is as follows. Destroy all connecting infrastructure from infected cities. Create massive exclusion zones where they're given a buffer zone to retreat at all times, and wait for the infection to simply burn itself out. The Green Flu has no aerial units, therefore fighter jets are impervious to the infected. And if those fighter jets are being launched from somewhere at a relatively long distance, there's no way that the infection can stop them. Another detail of this is in the parish. Papa Gator, who you talk to via radio, is assumed to be a carrier strike group. A carrier strike group can launch dozens of fighter aircraft from the deck of what's known as an aircraft carrier, which is a massive ship that works as a landing strip and a runway for military vehicles. If they can target each connecting bridge, the only natural land connectors in the United States are in Minnesota, which boasts a relatively cold climate. The Green Flu infection begins in October 2009, and after 14 days or 2 weeks, Left 4 Dead 1 begins. Both campaigns span anywhere from a few weeks to a month, depending on who you ask, since we get no confirmation from Valve or through lore. We can deduce this as the time span of the campaigns due to all of the traveling in the universe, meaning that the military is adapting quickly but also in full retreat. But I think this is intentional. Do you remember the buffer zone we previously spoke about? I think the military is allowing the average citizens east of New Orleans to fend for themselves in an effort to preserve the entire western United States. In Death Toll, we see mentions of a town that's been effectively holding out against the infected, the town of Riverside, where supposedly a small military detachment is holding out against the infected. But by the time the survivors make it there, it's too late and the town has fallen. But due to the fires still burning that are present throughout the campaign, it's safe to say that the town had not fallen long before the survivors arrived. Again, since we aren't given a definite answer as to when, we can assume they survived the first few weeks of the infection. So if a completely detached military group under constant attack from the infected can hold out for weeks, why does the entire US military retreat constantly? It only makes sense that it is purposeful. Now, it's safe to say that not every single part of the US mainland east of New Orleans is connected by bridge to the western United States, so the military would have to concentrate forces north of the beginning of the Mississippi River in Minnesota. But assuming they can continue their bombing runs from Canadian bases, or even from Western Air Force bases, it would be incredibly easy to hold back the infected. And on top of that, they may only have to stop the infected for a matter of 3 to 7 days to allow dehydration to wipe them out. The bodies of the infected are already under severe strain from the mutations of the Green Flu. Now, let's say this entire strategy falls apart in spectacular fashion. The Green Flu makes it through the geographic barrier that is the Mississippi River. Assuming my previous theory about the infected's susceptibility to cold is accurate, what remains of the military and American society can retreat to our northern neighbors in Canada, where the cold will slow down the infected considerably, if not outright get rid of them. And once the infection is finally defeated, it'll be left to the remnants of society to rebuild. But if society succeeds in that, will have to remain a mystery. Although, if we look at similar depictions of military quarantine in zombie media, it would most likely look like a 28 weeks later style scenario. In that film, the military slowly begins to repopulate cleared areas, but only under direct military supervision. Civilians are heavily monitored, movement is restricted, and the military maintains full control of infrastructure. Realistically, if something like the Green Flu ever happened, that's probably how recovery would begin, carefully reintroducing small groups of survivors into safe zones, while the army keeps a constant eye on everything. These zones wouldn't be anything close to freedom though. Think curfews, strict rationing, armed patrols on every corner, and a zero-tolerance policy for anyone showing signs of infection. It would feel less like rebuilding society and more like living in a massive detention camp, with the hope that eventually things might return to normal. And even then, normal would probably mean decades of rebuilding and heavy government oversight before people could actually call their lives free again. In the end, the story of the Green Flu isn't just about the chaos of an outbreak or the downfall of cities. It's about the delicate balance between survival and collapse. Every action taken by the military, every attempt to contain the infection, every desperate measure to preserve order, paints a picture of a world teetering on the edge of permanent ruin. The Green Flu is not like the plagues of the past, nor is it like the undead horrors of fiction. It is something new, something living, something that spreads with a terrifying efficiency and reshapes humanity itself. In such a reality, even the strongest nations are left scrambling to adapt, to calculate whether victory is possible, or whether survival alone is the best they can hope for. If humanity endures, the world that emerges from the Green Flu will not be the same one we knew. Entire cities may remain quarantined for decades, cut off from the outside world. New governments may rise, built upon the ashes of the old, their authority resting on how well they can keep the infection at bay. And the shadow of the outbreak will never fade, lingering as a reminder of how quickly civilization can falter when faced with something it was never prepared to fight. The truth is, no matter how many walls are raised, no matter how many bombs are dropped, or how many sacrifices are made, the Green Flu has already changed the course of history. Humanity may eventually reclaim the land, but it will never reclaim the world as it was. This is the legacy of the infection. Not just death, not just ruin, but transformation. A story that will continue to unfold long after the last shot is fired. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Left 4 Dead, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video, subscribed to the channel, and dropped a comment sharing your thoughts. What part of the military strategy or post-outbreak world building do you find most compelling? Your input helps shape future videos and discussions, and I can't wait to hear what you think. If you've made it this far in the video, I just want to say one big thank you, and I hope to see you next time.